definitely. And that's why, to bring it back to comics, like I feel like it's a lot easier in some ways of a medium to create a story, where you don't, I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages to both film and comics, but I feel like comics, when you decide to make one, you're almost like the director,
Right,
or
right.
the project coordinator, whatever you want to call it.
Well, if you think about being a writer for like a film or something where there's moving picture,
Yeah.
you have to think like, okay, I'm writing to not only the character, but I'm also writing to the actor.
Yeah.
So there's like several layers you have to write to consider. Whereas if you're writing comics, you're just writing the character and you don't have to worry about an actor and appearance is like, and that's the funny thing too. And actually this might be a little thing that we can kind of riff on for a minute here, but like I don't think too much about appearance of a character unless it's integral to the story. You know what I
You
mean?
mean
And I
like
don't know
how a
if you're
character looks, like
any detail like race,
oh,
gender, unless
interesting.
it's important to the story, like that's all irrelevant. I mean, there'd be times where I'd be talking to an artist and they're like, well, what do you think about this character? And he's like, I didn't really think about that beyond their function as a character, you know
Interesting.
and I also feel like that gives like any artist I work with a little bit of liberty to be able to have creative input, so they feel like they're
Gotcha.
part of the project and not just being dictated, illustrate this, across 22 pages.
Right. Oh, weird. Yeah, because like I think when I create a character, I do a little bit of that. Like, should this guy be white? Should this guy be black? Um, and yeah, I never thought about doing it that way, where it's just like leave it up to the interpretation. I guess unless you're, like in fact that the character has to be a woman, or
Right,
or
right. Well, like, if you're going to be writing about, like, oh, the Yakuza mob,
yeah,
you can't have, you got to write to that specifically.
gotcha,
That
yeah,
directs you specifically. So you have to make that choice. But like, if you're kind of, working on just the character portion of it and like their function in the story and what do you want them to do? Like, like, oh, I want to write a story about a rookie cop,
yeah,
and what's this rookie cop involved in, and what's the path of his character arc. That it's only after the fact I'm like, well, okay, is he a man, is he a woman, does that improve the
right. Like, does it
story, does that
affect the
detract?
story?
Right, yeah, so that's only a question I would pose after the fact.
Is he old? Is he young?
Is he
Is
old, is
he
he young, or even any of that at all? And if none of that seems relevant, that's where I'd say, well, let's leave it up to the artist. You know
hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I never thought to do that, or I never had an instant situation where I was like, oh, this guy's going to be ambiguous, unless it was just a small, like, nothing character that either gets killed, in the first page or so, or even like a character being rescued or some, it's just like it's just like a device for the storyline, then I don't really
Right,
care. I let the artist do all that.
right, right.
um but if the character is part of the story in any kind of major way, I think I usually have all of that in mind beforehand. But yeah, I never thought to just do it like blindly like that.
Well, it depends upon the function of the story, like I
Right,
said
yeah,
before, right?
exactly.
Like,
Like if
if
you're
it's something specific, then, obviously you want to point to, okay, this has to be a man or this has to be a woman. But, and, in some ways, it doesn't have to be anything. When you're writing, it's just like your open sandbox. You know what I mean? You could do
yeah, it's
whatever
a
you want.
it's interesting philosophy, especially for writing comics too. Like, even like bringing it back to film for a second, you could probably do that with a character you write in the screenplay. If the actor shows up and it's like, well, that's what this character is all of a sudden.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's been plenty of times where I've put out a casting call and I've had a specific idea for a character and somebody gives a different, a better performance, but they're not quite there. It's like obviously you have to go with the flow and you
Yeah.
have to adapt it for what works for the scenario. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Whereas comics, I don't think you have as much of that issue, especially if the story doesn't really call for, specifics on the character traits and stuff like that.
Right, right.
Although I seem to use some of the traits, when I create a character for a reason, like when I'm thinking about it, like just, I can't think of any character off the top of my head, but like, like I feel like when I create them, I have that reason that they are this race or this a man or a woman, or you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
depending on what it is. So, but
Look at
so
us, two white guys talking about characterization.
one thing I wanted to add to your point about when you started going to conventions, I did
Yes.
too. Like that's I didn't start setting up to conventions until we started doing the web stuff, because our webisodes were very geek centric. We often called the show like Big Bang Theory if it was actually funny.
Hmm.
So and we our first Comic Con was actually Wizard World Philly 2008, I believe.
Were you attending or were you going
No,
as like an exhibitor?
we went as an exhibitor.
Okay,
So
gotcha,
we
gotcha.
rent. So the way we worked it too is like four of us were the you know the core members of the group, I guess, and we would all split the cost evenly four ways.
Okay.
So I think at the time at Wizard World, we ended up getting a booth, and it was like still expensive then, and I want to say it was like 500 or something, but it was like a nice booth.
Yeah,
We were
yeah.
right next to Zenoscope. It was like their first or second year publishing, and it
You
was
know what's funny?
wild. What's
In
that?
San Diego, well, not to cut you off, I was gonna say, what's funny is that in San Diego,
Yeah.
yeah, I have that legacy spot that I'm in,
Oh yeah,
2103. We're
yeah,
there
yeah.
every year. We're right next to Xenoscope.
Are you? That's funny.
Yes, that's too funny, man.
But they were wild. Like they could the stuff that they were doing to promote comics. Not to get off on a tangent here, but
Yeah,
you wouldn't see now necessarily. They had like scantily they must have
they
hired
still do it.
strippers. Do
They
they do that
still,
still?
yeah, they still get the booth babes, and
Oh,
I mean it's a
okay.
little more muted and toned down. They're not like in
Okay.
the bikinis out front pulling you in, but like they've got like a couple of attractive booth individuals
Booth
there out
babies.
front,
Okay.
and yeah,
Good.
and then they got like all the like the busty like stuff that looks like it was just 5 minutes into the future of the 90s
Yes.
style. You know what I
That's
mean? So
exactly.
that's still all there. And there's a market for that. And it's real funny. I had a conversation with another creative friend of mine,
Mhm.
who's been on our show before, my good friend Jeff Ryder,
Oh, Jeff. Yeah, yeah.
about making something provocative, earning money off that, but also being tasteful enough where you can stand behind the work. You
Yeah.
can say, yes, I did this, I produced this, and this and that.
Yeah, like I couldn't speak to their quality because I've never read it. Those bad girl comics, it is a genre of itself, but I yeah, it was never my thing in any form. The only one I can
Yeah,
kind of remember reading was a Vertigo title called Codename Knockout that was kind of like a parody of all that stuff, and that's why I
sure,
kind of liked it because it was kind of funny.
sure,
But
sure.
but to get back to the whole Wizard World thing, um that was our first time going. We all we had at the table was our business cards and one DVD that we made with like 3 episodes on it, and we were trying to get people to buy it. We were there more for promo, so
Right.
we were just kind of walking around and handing it, getting people to come over and check it out. We had a TV on the booth playing like a trailer and all this stuff. We were like, dude, we made it, because
Yeah,
you're at this
yeah,
first show. But what ended up happening as the years went on, and we were doing the hero and stuff and selling DVDs, I kind of wanted to do comics because I kept seeing like, people there selling their indie books, and I would often walk through Artist Alley when I wasn't promoting at the table, and I would look at people's stuff and talk to artists and stuff because I was still reading comics pretty heavily. And yeah, and it's something flipped. Like it's like I want to make a comic. Like even when we were doing the webisodes, I'm like, I'm gonna go and work on a comic that's gonna tie into our webisodes, and that's where I started like the first hero and miniseries. But yeah, that's where I got the bug for it, was just going to a few shows like that.